Danny Kelly. Sorry.
What's happening?
We went late there with Ryan Divish, and that's my bad.
No
Danny
worries.
Kelly joins us every Wednesday to talk all things NFL and fantasy football there as well. You can find Danny on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly, senior staff writer, The Ringer, fantasy football show, and, of course, The Ringer NFL Draft Show. It's all brought to you by Georgetown Brewery, locally owned and operated, pouring the greatest, best local craft beer for the past 23 years. Manny's Pale Ale, Rogers, Bodie's Off, all of it. They are open, the tap room, 10 a.m., 8 p.m., 7 days a week. Visit them at georgetownbeer.com. All right. Where do you want to start first? Do you want to start with why did Taylor Swift ruin Travis Kelce? You want to go there? Or?
Well, we could do that for sure. Yeah.
People are thinking that because that's the underlying storyline right now with Travis Kelce. His production's down. He's not really incorporated the offense. And what people want to say is, see, this is the Taylor Swift effect. This is what's happening. Right? That's what people want to say.
I mean, it also just so happens that he's getting older, and people, as they get older, their bodies tend to not be quite as fast and explosive and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, he's definitely fallen off like pretty precipitously in terms of like production and what we were expecting coming into the season from a fantasy point of view. He was anywhere from, depending on where you look, the tight end 1 or tight end 2 to 3 coming into the season. And right now he is the tight end 26, right behind a fella named Johnny Munt, who, you weren't drafting Johnny Munt in the first 3 rounds of your fantasy draft.
I have no idea. Who does Johnny Munt play for?
Vikings, I believe. He is basically backup for TJ Hawkinson, who is nursing an ACL injury at the moment. So, he's basically right now in terms of even expected fantasy points per game, he's right around Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz plays for the Commanders now. Zach Ertz, famously, like one of the funniest like storylines in NFL for the last few years is Zach Ertz never picks up any yards after the catch. He just catches the ball and falls down. And that's kind of, unfortunately, what Travis Kelce has been so far this year. I don't think he's necessarily going to be like this all year. But Kelce has a total of 21 yards after the catch this year in 3 games. So,
okay, and everyone's kind of saying the same thing, Danny, right? Oh my God, the Chiefs' offense, it's struggling. They're 3-0.
Right.
That's the thing I love about these guys is that they struggle so much, but still they're 3-0.
I know. Well, they have a very good defense, and I think offensively they have adopted a much more ball control type of offense over the last couple of years, especially last year when, they didn't have any good receivers, essentially. Like their receiving core last year was one of the worst I've ever seen. So this year they have, Rashee Rice is coming into his own. He's basically stealing all those Travis Kelce routes over the middle, the run after the catch, crossing routes. And so, I think this offense is going to be fine. I think Patrick Mahomes is going to be just fine. And as they start to incorporate Xavier Worthy, their rookie, into the offense a little bit more going forward, I think that they'll continue to get better. So I'm not worried whatsoever about the Chiefs.
I want to go back just to the Seahawks here for just a quick. Go back to the Seahawks here just initially. They're off to a 3-0 start. Okay, everything's going great. They haven't really played anyone. So right. I think you've got to take that into account. What do you make of the 3-0 start? Is it kind of a pretender for them, or do you see? Because people want to knock them for it, right? They want to knock them a little bit for their start. What's your take on how they've done it today?
I mean, I think you have to play the teams that you're playing, right? You only can play the teams that you're lined up against, the quarterbacks you're lined up against, and they've done a pretty good job of dominating all 3 so far. It hasn't been perfect by any means, but I'm very, very encouraged. Their pressure rate defensively has spiked dramatically from last year, which is really encouraging. That's basically what we were hoping for and expecting from Mike McDonald. Like, figure out a way to get these pressures coming from the edge. They do the complexity, the illusion of complexity thing where they have guys dropping and, coming from different directions and things like that. So I've been really, really encouraged with that. Their run defense seems a lot more disciplined than it was last year. I know they gave up a lot of rush yards against the Patriots, but for the most part, I've been pretty encouraged with their run defense. And, I think their offense is good. And I think their offense is going to continue to be good. Geno Smith has been really, really, I think one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL this year. So, overall, very encouraged. I know that the real test starts when they start playing some of these real quarterbacks, but I mean 3-0, you got a good cushion in the division. I'm not complaining at all. Like, this is exactly what you'd hope to do playing 3 bad teams.
Yeah, I mean, and the thing too, Danny, right? We've been watching a lot of Seahawks football in the past, and I just think of Colt McCoy every time. In the past, they lose to teams like this, right?
Yeah,
they lose to teams, and it's massively frustrating.
Yeah, again, this is you beat the teams that you're supposed to beat. Like, that's like half of the battle in the NFL, I feel like. And just don't give up some of these gimme type games. You have to take advantage of the matchups when you have good matchups, and like I said, they've done a really good job of clamping down on the bad quarterbacks they've faced, so you have to feel good about that. And by the way, like, the defense is probably going to get a little bit better as the season goes on, as they start to really learn this new system and start to figure out, like, and the coaches start to figure out exactly who's best at what. We've seen that, year in and year out with the Pete Carroll defenses. They start to get a little bit better as the season goes on. I think we could expect the same from the Seahawks, as long as they can stay healthy, of course. And that's a huge question mark.
Yeah, and that's, and then we'll find out more, this week, I think, on the health of Leonard Williams and Byron Murphy, and to see where they're at. And here's the thing I enjoy about McDonald. He doesn't give you anything. There's just nothing. Yeah. Like, that is, and I'm not, these guys don't need to win the press conferences. They don't need to give people anything. I get it. But he will give you nothing when it comes to injuries.
Yeah, he's got the Harbaugh tree type of thing, where he's just like, we'll see. Yeah. We'll see what happens. I'm going to try and get him out there to practice, and we'll see what happens.
For as young as he is, he's so old school.
Yes. I actually love that. It's funny because, we went from the Seahawks went from the oldest coach in the NFL, but he was like the youngest at heart, kind of.
Yeah. He's bouncing around, and he's snapping his gum, and he's throwing the football, and he's got his white Monarchs on. Yeah.
And now you got the youngest coach in the NFL, and he's like an old soul. He's very, disciplined, stoic. It's just like a total contrast to what we had with Pete Carroll, and I'm enjoying it so far. Obviously, I think the results have been great, but Brady Henderson just put together an article this morning that was really interesting on ESPN, basically talking about how McDonald is essentially like so much more of a disciplinarian. He's like, he has these guys kind of like, it's almost like a drill sergeant type of attitude versus, the Pete Carroll, where it was like, a father figure almost, kind of, and like, so it's a very, very different style and identity, I think, from a coaching point of view. And it's just fun to watch, kind of that huge difference after 14 seasons with Pete Carroll.
I'll be honest with Danny. I think sometimes this new age player gets a bad rap. Because they can't be coached hard.
Right.
And I think they can. And I think they can be coached like this.
Just because you're Gen Z doesn't mean you can't be coached a certain way, right? Like, everybody's a little different, for sure. But based on like the quotes we've seen from the players, it's like basically they already have a ton of respect for him. It's like, basically, can you command respect? It's not can you take hard coaching, There's a difference. It's, can you command respect? And I think McDonald has the players' respect already. And that's like the most important thing, honestly, for a coach is, do the players buy in? Do the players respect you? Do they listen? Do they think you're doing the right thing? Everything we've heard is like, they think he's really smart. They're leading him in the right direction, and they're excited to kind of like get with the program. So, I think that's been a huge factor here. He commands respect from the players, and obviously, I think from the fans so far as well.
We've come a long way from taking down pictures in the hallway.
God, yeah.
I'm so glad. It's so nice one of those. I'll raise them. I was one of those who's like, I don't like it. I'll be honest. I didn't.
Yeah. Well, I don't know, because like from his point of view, I can understand. Like, you have huge shoes to fill when you're coming in for Pete Carroll. Of
course,
you got to. I think I honestly respected the willingness to ruffle feathers and come in here and change things up. And this is my team now. Like, this is not the Pete Carroll Seahawks anymore.
Sure, but we needed something at that time to talk about. All right,
sure, of course.
Okay, for someone for us that do this. And you come up with something for 2-3 hours a day to talk about. I needed Picturegate to be there.
Well, I mean, look, the players. I think Richard Sherman came out and was kind of like complaining about it. So from the player point of view,
a lot of them did. A lot of them were like ex-players, like, I don't really quite understand that. It wasn't just funny, idiots like me.
Was not just a media fabricated thing, but you're right.
He's just it's so far so good. It's gonna be a fun matchup this week because I've been thinking about this all week long, and I'm sure others have as well. What could have been, right? We could have been playing this game Monday night in Detroit, and on the sideline for the Seahawks is Ben Johnson. And the storyline this week is Ben Johnson going back home to face the Detroit Lions. I mean, it was close where Ben Johnson, there was a lot of reports that he was going to be the guy, that he was deciding between Seattle and he was and Washington. Mm-hmm. And then if he was the choice in Seattle, then the choice in Washington was going to be Mike McDonald. And Dan Quinn was going to be the guy left out. I mean, in a weird, and I mentioned this earlier with Jim when he was on, in a weird alternate universe, Ben Johnson's the head coach of the Seahawks on Monday.
I know, and if I'm being completely honest with myself, I was rooting for the Ben Johnson thing because
so was I.
Yeah, I have like sort of just a philosophy in this day and age with the way that the NFL has kind of evolved is like having an offensive head coach allows you to keep your coach. It allows you to keep that play caller. Like the play caller is such an important variable in an offensive ecosystem. Or in a franchise ecosystem. And so, the idea of being able to have that like McVay or Matt LaFleur, like whoever you want to mention, Shanahan type of like offensive mind in the building where you can keep him for a long time is really important. And if you look at the NFL, around the NFL, I think the longest tenured offensive coordinator and real offense, and by that I mean like play caller is like 2 years. So if you're really good, you become a head coach, and if you're bad, you're not really playing calls or call plays, I should say. And so, I think ultimately I'm very glad with how it kind of all went down because I think Mike McDonald is, he's the McVay of the defense in theory, hopefully. But yeah, I was definitely rooting for Ben Johnson at the time. I kind of, I quickly talked myself into McDonald though.
Yeah, I mean, you wanted the offensive guy, and he was the offensive coordinator du jour. But then the stuff comes out, and I don't know how much of it's true or not true, but that he interviewed poorly, and they were like, no thanks.
Yeah,
I mean, like that decision to not hire Ben Johnson. I mean, the trickle down is what we just talked about. Dan Quinn probably doesn't end up in Washington, and Mike McDonald is not here in Seattle and whatever Detroit is doing, with their offense. So I just will be a fun storyline because, again, 3 games in, they've won, but they face Bo Nix, Jacoby Brissett, Skylar Thompson.
Right.
They get a much better quarterback in Jared Goff. I know he's not having a great season, but this is an offense. It wants to be physical against them. And how are they going to respond with that physicality? I mean, the Patriots a few weeks ago were physical with them in the running game, and they dominated the running game against Seattle.
Yeah, that's my big worry, especially if Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams are out this week. That's going to be... Man, it's going to be really tough because I think the Lions are the type of team that if something's working, they're not afraid to stick with it and kind of just like dominate the game from the trenches. They've spent all these picks and all this cap money on their offensive line. It's one of the better offensive lines in the NFL. So, they're a little bit banged up too. I think Frank Ragnow has an issue.
Yeah, he's out. Davenport's out. They're
Laporta,
and Laporta's done, or he's out for a bit.
He has an injury right now. We're not sure if he'll play. He's got an ankle injury right now.
Yeah.
So.
This has been the craziest start to the NFL season.
Seriously.
Because like the 49ers got a bunch of injuries. We got it on the rundown. But injuries across the league. The latest one with Justin Jones for Arizona. He's done for the year with a torn tricep. I mean, this has just been, I don't know. I mean, I think it's just all coincidence. There's no rhyme or reason to it, but this has been the year of a rash of injuries across the NFL.
Yeah, to big name players, big high impact players, especially. So it's just, I do believe, like you said, it's a very random thing. Some years it's not as bad as others. And you could probably point to the idea that, people not playing in the preseason, people not hitting in training camp and all that stuff may have something to do with it. But I bet you it's all noise.
I have a theory.
What's that?
The dynamic kickoff.
Let's blame that.
I think we should start start a movement here. The reason for the rash of injuries is the dynamic kickoff, even though none of these guys are on the dynamic kickoff. But let's start it. Let's see if we can get a groundswell moving. Someone bigger than us picks it up. and then we get rid of the dynamic kickoff.
Just don't fact check any of the the stats around that, or the fact that these guys are not really playing on kickoffs at all.
Yeah, don't do any of that, but just let's get rid of it. But if these injuries, in again, Seattle's dealing with their own.
Mm-hmm.
But man, I mean, just you got a 2-game lead right now in the division, and all of your rivals, they're all dealing with injuries. I mean, you are as well a little bit, but you got to take advantage of this right now.
100%. And that's the other reason it's like, man, count your blessings that we're 3-0. I don't care who we played. Like the other teams in the division right now are really going through it. Like the Rams, I know that they won that last game. I honestly don't know how they won that last game. That was pretty miraculous on their part, but I don't think that they have it in them to be like an actual contender this year with the types of injuries that they've sustained, the number of injuries that they've sustained. It's like their whole offensive line, essentially. Their 2 top receivers. I know Cooper Kupp probably will be back sooner than later, but, passing 19 times to one player is not necessarily like a great way to win a game. Like you have to have a little bit more balance in that. And so I don't think the Rams are probably going to have just like the horses this year to compete. And then I think the 49ers, just be glad that the 49ers are losing games right now because they're going to come back. I think they'll be fine. They have so much talent, so many top tier players on that offense. And Brock Purdy honestly looked really, really good last week despite having all those injuries. So I don't think they're going anywhere. So just this cushion is really important right now.
Yeah, of course. The 0-3 teams, we got the Jags, Titans, Bengals. Who's the most in trouble?
For me, it's between the Jags and the Titans. Right. The Jags look like an absolute mess to me. I just think, despite some of the talent they have on that team, it just does not work for whatever reason, for a multitude of reasons, whether it's coaching, the quarterback decision-making, the vibes. I don't know, like there's a curse on this team or something, but
could be.
They just do not look good to me. They're just always a little bit out of sorts. And then the Titans, I think the Titans, they have some talent too, and I think that, they have a little bit more potential to bounce back, but man, they just got to get Will Levis to stop making these back-breaking mistakes every week because that's really kind of sinking them. And so, I think with both teams, it's a quarterback and turnover issue. And I don't know for sure if either of them can kind of solve that. If you look at the number of turnovers that Trevor Lawrence has had over the last couple of years, it's pretty wild.
Okay, so Doug Peterson, I mean, it's going to start, right? One of these guys is going to get fired. I always thought that Eberflus is going to be one that will eventually be on the chopping block this year. I don't think Dave Canales yet, but who knows with that guy. Doug Peterson, it just feels, I think Albert Breer's already come out and talked about how, hey, watch out for Bill Belichick in Jacksonville.
Can you imagine? That seems just like the polar opposite franchise to the Patriots. I know that the Patriots, when he took over, were kind of a terrible, a down in the dumps team, but it's just a funny contrast to think about him in Jacksonville and the hot weather in Florida. But yeah,
and then playing in London every other week.
I know, so bizarre. I guess Belichick, I feel could kind of get into that because he's all about history, military history and stuff. He could probably bond with them about all the World War II stories and stuff. But yeah, I think that kind of is what I was getting at with the Jags. Is it doesn't feel like they have a rudder. You know what I mean? And ultimately the buck stops with the head coach. I don't know one way or another if Doug Peterson is a good or bad coach, but at the end of the day, this is a disastrous team so far, and at some point you got to make a change. And so, yeah, I would not be surprised. Do you think is the talk that that Belichick will come coach this year, or are we waiting till after?
I mean, I don't know. I mean,
he's got so many other jobs right now.
He does. The guy is everywhere. He is. You can't turn on the. I don't know who's on more now. Is it Belichick or is it Jason Kelce?
Right. I think those are the two most favorite or famous people in football right now and in football media.
My favorite show though, and I just see clips of it. I don't even know where it's at. Maybe it's on the CW. Yeah. Whatever show that Belichick does with Michael Lombardi.
Oh yeah, I don't know. I'm not sure 100%. I think so. There's an Inside the NFL. I think that's on the CW.
Is that one? Because what I love about it, he just did this whole film breakdown on Cam Ward, Miami quarterback, of course, was at Wazoo, and he likes him. But what I can't take my eyes off is Lombardi's toupee, and it's unbelievable how bad it is.
I did see a clip from that show where Belichick was like doing a pop quiz to a couple of different people. I think it was like Chad Ochocinco.
So I think that's inside the NFL, like the old like HBO Showtime. Now it's on the CW.
Yeah. And I thought, I shared that around to some of my friends because I thought that was like, this is what they got to have Belichick doing. It's like, explain to us NFL history, because it was basically he went through and was breaking down the Shanahan Kubiak, like tree from where it started. There's all these pictures of Shanahan and Kubiak on the sidelines back in like the 90s. It was like so funny to see. And now these are the guys that are like running the NFL essentially. And so I thought that was like really good from Belichick in terms of like, that's probably the best thing I've seen him do in the media so far is just get him talking about the history of the game. And he's like, he goes off. It's awesome.
It's amazing, these guys who are just, the personalities as coaches, they don't nothing, and then they go into that world and they're unbelievable. Like Chris Peterson at UW. Now he's doing Fox College football, and Chris Peterson's great. But when he was the head coach, he was just like, I don't want to talk about anything.
I mean, if you were a head coach, though, don't you think that's like the best way to approach it? It's kind of like the McDonald thing. It's like, honestly, if I don't have to give the media anything, why would I? I understand the relationship with the media like matters, but at the same time, it's like, I'm not telling you anything I don't need to. I'm like not legally required to tell you, kind of deal. So.
Probably, I would always take the Mike Holmgren approach. And just way back in the day, he'd always diffuse every question when he didn't want to answer it with, what's your name, Steve? Steve, that's a great question, Steve. And then he'd filibuster.
Yeah.
But when
just talk about something else,
he would diffuse the question that he didn't want to answer by making sure that he knew the name of the person.
Yeah.
And then that like softened it. And then the reporter felt, I don't want to do a follow-up. He knows my name. But
that's savvy.
It is savvy. Do we think Malik Willis has found it and figured it out?
That's a great question. I had we have a thing on our show every Sunday on the Ringer Fantasy Football Show plug. Yeah.
There you go. What time does that air?
It goes up late Sunday night after the games. And then we record shows on Monday and Wednesday and Friday. So we get those all going on all week.
You can find it Spotify, everywhere where you find your podcast.
Yeah, exactly. Right? Thank you very much.
Yes.
But yeah, we have a thing on our show called Intrusive Thoughts. And it's basically like, I don't know if this is like actually a thing, but I had this thought. I'm like, does the success of Malik Willis the last couple of weeks like make you think Jordan Love is actually not that good? Like, you know what I mean? Like if they can do this with Malik Willis, like why not just stick with this? And I'm not saying I actually believe that, but I did have that kind of thought enter my brain. I'm like, maybe Jordan Love's not as good as we think. Maybe this is just an awesome scheme, an awesome coach, because he's looked incredible. I mean, I don't think it's probably super repeatable over the long term. It's probably they captured lightning in a bottle a little bit with these two games. But I mean, he has been incredible on third downs. He adds an element with his legs in terms of like what they can do in the run game. We've seen what the Commanders have been able to do with Jaden Daniels this year, and like when Malik Willis came into the NFL, I was obviously a little bit higher on him than he ended up like being with the Titans. I kind of thought like a creative team that utilizes his legs, like he comes in, he's going to be one of the better runners at quarterback in the NFL already at the first minute he steps on the field. And I've really liked what the Packers have done in terms of, getting him involved in the run game. Just his presence there on like read option plays, like a hold defenses, it'll kind of like freeze a guy. You don't have to block him. So it gives you an advantage in the run game. They've done some really cool things with end arounds and motion and all that. So just a really, really creative job by Matt LaFleur in terms of like getting the most out of him. And he's looked really good, honestly. Like, and the proof is in the pudding. On third downs, he's been one of the best quarterbacks over the last 2 weeks on third downs. And is that repeatable? Probably not. Like, likely not. But he's been great. Like his success rate and his EPA per dropback on third downs is literally like first or second in the NFL over the last 2 weeks.
Yeah, I just ask you because again, eventually, and we're not pushing Geno Smith out the door and he's playing great. You have to find a quarterback of the future. And I'm just wondering, if you don't find it in the draft, can you find it in someone who is flamed out here and then all of a sudden you give a second chance? Like I remember right when Bryce Young got benched, I saw it somewhere, speculation. Should maybe Seattle go and see if they can pry him out of Carolina? They clearly have always had a trade history with Green Bay with Schneider's connections there.
True.
So I don't know, just something to kind of file away if he continues to play well. Can you find a guy that eventually takes over for Geno Smith there and Malik Willis? And then you brought him up, and I wanted to ask you about Jayden Daniels. This is a guy. It's why you can't judge these guys, and you got to let them grow at their own rate. I remember watching him at Arizona State, just going, okay. And then he went to LSU, and I'm thinking he's not going to do well there. It's the SEC. He's going to get crushed. And then he wins the Heisman. He gets drafted, and he's looked great. Of all the guys, he's looked the best. It's
so, I mean, look, this is a perfect example of why it's just so hard to evaluate quarterbacks because, like you said, this is a fifth-year senior. He's been playing since, like, he was throwing passes to Brandon Ayuk, who's just signed his second contract. You know what I mean? Like, he's been in college football for a long time. That created a little bit of doubt in the back of my mind. Like, maybe he's just, like, 3 years older than everybody he's playing against, and like that matters a lot in the college football. He's got two guys that he's throwing football to that are already kind of lighting it up in the NFL. Like Malik Neighbors, I don't know, is he a top 10 receiver in the NFL already? Maybe.
He's playing like it.
Like, he looks incredible. He's doing things that we've never seen from the receiver position in his first 3 games. Like, truly setting records already. And then the Michael, what's his name? Not Michael Thomas. The guy for the Jaguars. I'm blanking on his name. The other receiver. He has like the most generic name, and I always forget it for some reason.
Hold on, I'm going to find it for you now because now I'm blanking on it.
It's like something like akin to Michael Thomas, like the most generic name, and I can't believe I'm forgetting it. But
it happens when you get on the spot like this. You can't forget Brian Thomas.
Yeah, Brian Thomas Jr.
Thomas Jr.
So Brian Thomas Jr. He's already looking good for the Jags. Yeah. And so it's like, man, he was thrown to these 2 guys, 2 first rounders, both look really good already. Yeah. Like, how much does that have, an effect on what he's done in the college? And yeah, and to his credit, Jaden Daniels already looks incredible. Like, he looks like he's under complete control. They've already played 2 games where they didn't punt. Like, to me, that's like the wildest stat you can find about him. Wow. They've already 2 out of 3 games they have not punted.
Jesus.
Which is like never happens. I mean, like, I think somebody shared a stat the other day. It's like Brady had like 2 games in his career where they never punted, and Jayden Daniels has played 3 games.
Yeah, that's wild.
I know, it's pretty crazy. And so, and honestly, it's not just like pure luck. The things that they can do with him as a runner in the short, like in short yardage situations and in the red zone, are kind of similar in my mind to like the tush push revolution, where they are just like unstoppable on 3rd and short and 4th and short in 3rd down situations and in the red zone. And that like is incredibly valuable for your offense because you essentially have this extra down to work with. Yeah. And so, and we saw him pass deep a little bit more in this last game. And if he can unlock that and like be pretty consistent throwing the ball down the field, they're going to be pretty tough to stop. I'm not like completely sold that Jayden Daniels is like, already proven himself already. You know what I mean? Like, I still think he has a lot to do in the NFL and to prove that he can, be a game in and game out consistent like passer in the NFL. But it's hard not to be really excited about what he's done already.
Before we go, before we cut you loose, give me a fantasy waiver pickup guy. Who do you got? What's burning up right now? Who's the most popular guy to grab if he's available?
For me, Bucky Irving for the Buccaneers, a rookie running back out of Oregon. Yeah. He's looked incredible already, and he's like on the verge. He's on the cusp of taking the job straight up from Rachaad White in Tampa Bay. If you look at some of their stats, like, first of all, they're within 2 points of each other in fantasy already through 3 weeks. Like, Rachaad White was, I don't know, 3rd or 4th round pick, and Bucky Irving was a complete afterthought. They've almost done exactly the same thing through 3 games. So go pick up Bucky Irving if he's still out there for some reason on waivers, because I think sooner or later he's going to have the lead back job, is certainly on early downs, and I think he has the skill set to be kind of like a 3-down guy if they eventually go to him, if Rachaad White continues to not really do much on the ground. So he's the stash at least type of player, but I think you can also play him just because of the way that they're utilizing him.
Okay, we'll go check it out. Danny B. Kelly on Twitter, senior staff writer, Ringer Fantasy Football Show, Ringer NFL Draft Show. Tell everyone again where we can find all the work there with the Ringer and the fantasy stuff and the NFL show.
You can find our weekly rankings at theringer.com. You can find our show on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. It's the Ringer Fantasy Football Show, and you can find me on Twitter at Danny B. Kelly. Also, we are on TikTok and Instagram now, so Look up the Ringer Fantasy Football Show on both of those.
Hey, I'll have my teenager. She can come over and tell you how to do all the TikTok dances.
Yeah, I need the help. I don't know. I don't understand TikTok in particular. But yeah.
No one does. We talk all things NFL every single week. Brought to you by Georgetown Beer, Georgetown Brewery, Manny's Pale Ale, Bodie's Alpha IPA, Rogers Pilsner. There's something coming soon. I'm just going to tease that. Tap room open 10 a.m. to 8 p.m. 7 days a week. Go visit them at georgetownbeer.com. You're the best. Sorry for the delay. We'll talk to you next week.
All good, man. Thank you.